Students, this is Unit 2, Segments, Lines, and Angles. Lesson 2.7, Parallel Lines and Angles. Don't forget date, time, and location, and to get a parent signature or guardian sign-off. Let's do a little review here, a little review before we go on here. In the diagram to the right, I'd like you to write out the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. Write the equation of this line in slope-intercept form. Pause. Okay, welcome back. Now, this probably was a little bit more challenging than you thought it would be. Let's take a look at the pieces involved here. Now, ready, slope-intercept form is this. It's y equals mx plus b. Now, let's define our terms. B is the y-intercept. And, of course, that slope, that m, is the slope. So you take a look at what we actually have here. We have a point that's at -1, comma, -3. We have a point here that's at -3, comma, +3. And you ask yourself, now you only need two things here. We only need two things. We need a slope, and we need an intercept. Now the slope we can get very, very easily here. It's y minus y over x minus x. So let's do that. We're going to box our y's and subtract. And I'm going to circle my x's and subtract. Double negative makes a positive. Double negative makes a positive here. And we get -3/1. Now we can check that and see if that's true just by bunny hopping. 1, 2, 3, and 1. 1, 2, 3, and 1. So we know this is good. We know that this is going to be our M. Problem is, we don't know what our B is. And the graph, you could come down and you could try to infer, obviously the B is here somewhere. There's actually an easier way to specifically find the B once you have the slope. Let's write this down. Y equals mx plus b. Always ask yourself what you do have. We just found the slope, so we now have that. -3/1. Ask yourself, do we have a coordinate for x? Well, we do. Looky there. -1. Do we have a coordinate that we could use for a y? Yes. Plus b. Now we're down to one variable. So you solve. So it says b right here is -6. Let's see if that's actually true. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and looky there, it works. So our final equation, y equals mx plus b, is y equals our slope, -3/1 x, and it's -6. Take a moment. If you had no idea how to do this, I recommend that you just take 10 seconds and recap this verbally to yourself. How did we do this? Pause, recap, restart. Welcome back. Let's take a peek here. Now what we're doing next. Parallel lines and angles. I need you to star this. Star this. this is one lesson. I call this a longevity lesson. In other words, this particular concept you're going to see frequently, in future math classes. Just a couple years ago, I had a calculus teacher come back to me and ask our notes for particularly this lesson, because they were doing something in calculus class that used parallel lines, in which she needed to review some of their geometry skills. So parallel lines and angles has an extremely long longevity. You're going to see it in several future math classes and even SATs. Believe it or not, your secret weapon, I actually gave you, hopefully, or you needed to pick it up in class, I gave you a secret weapon that makes this particular lesson so much easier. It's like a decoder ring, if you will, for those of you who have any clue what that is. And that is a humble stir stick. Now that stir stick was not for you to chew on. So if you've got that stuck in your mouth already, you need to go find another stir stick, or even a straw, or some other small, thin, straight implement if you've managed to stick that in your mouth. Please don't. Okay, because you're going to be using this to put on your paper to do something with it. So let's talk about what parallel lines are versus something called skew. So you need a straight edge. So besides a stir stick, you do need a straight edge, and you do need colors today. I would even recommend a highlighter. Do have colors out, have a straight edge, have a stir stick, obviously a pencil. Now, when you were in elementary school, you probably defined parallel lines as this. Why don't you trace these two running girder supports? Just trace them. And in real life, those two segments never intersect. We would call those parallel. Parallel. The little emblem for parallel are those little arrow feathers. So the definition you probably learned for parallel is lines which never intersect. Well, I've got news for you. That's not the only lines that never intersect. Let me demonstrate. Over here on this Greek temple, these two columns are parallel as well. They are parallel. They go the same direction and never intersect. Black does not show up. Let's try red. Okay, so those are parallel. However, if you can think in 3D, the next two segments also never intersect, but they're not parallel. Switch colors. I don't care what you switch to. But for example, let's say you have this segment right there. Think of that roof line going that way. And now draw in the front horizontal. You have to think in 3D here, 3 dimensions. These two blue lines, one is technically it's coming towards you. The other one is horizontal. They are not intersecting. They are not physically touching anywhere, but yet they're not parallel. So it's very important in geometry class, parallel lines don't intersect, but they go the same direction. Whereas these lines, the blue ones, those are called skew. Okay, so parallel and skew, they have something in common. They both never intersect. They both never intersect. But the difference is this. Parallel lines are on the same plane and never intersect. So for example, this box, you trace those, they're on the same front plane. They're on the same plane right there. I'm going to shade it for you. They're on the same plane and never intersect. Those are what we call parallel. Notice my little arrow feathers. That means parallel. But if you have two lines that never intersect, but different planes, for example, again, let me go ahead and pull this blue line here, trace it. Now that blue line is on this top blue plane. And this blue line here, this edge, in 3D, they will never intersect. That one belongs to this plane. So the blue and the pink are what we call skew. They never intersect, but they're not on the same plane. Now, some interesting things happen when we do have parallel lines. We're going to get into that. But before I do, I need to introduce something called a transversal. Anytime you have two lines, just trace two lines. They don't have to be parallel. Just trace that one and trace this one. Anytime you have two lines cut by a third line, or intersected or cut across by a third line or segment, that's called a transversal. I want you to lay your stir stick there, because I'm going to use the term transversal and stir stick interchangeably. So you have a stir stick, I literally want that stir stick right on your paper right there. That's what we're going to call a transversal. Transversal cuts across two other lines. I'm going to call it your stir stick. Now the angles created by that transversal have some special names. And I'm going to use specifically these four colors, and you'll do well to follow these same four colors. I'm going to use blue, I'm going to use green, I'm going to use red, and I'm going to use, you could either use purple or a highlighter, whatever you have. Okay, now we're going to be, these are all pairs of angles, so they're talking about relationships to each other. We have this in families. We have mother and daughter. There's a relationship there. We have aunt and niece. There's a relationship there. Uncle, nephew, relationship. Cousin to cousin, there's relationship. All those words describe relationships between people as related in a family. The next four terms, four types of angles I give you, they're all talking about relationships of angles in reference to a stir stick. Ready? We're going to trace one set of angles which are on opposite sides of the stir stick, but still between the lines. I like you to lightly shade, very lightly shade, the space between the lines. Just very lightly shade it. That's what we're going to be calling interior, between the lines. Okay, you ready? We're going to trace two angles, which are on opposite sides of the stir stick, but still between the lines. So I'm going to sweep 4 and 5 with blue. Notice blue. Do not put hatch marks. They're not equal in this case. These angles, opposite sides of the stir stick, but between the lines, those are called alternate interior. Alternate interior angles. Now I'd like you to trace one set of angles which are on opposite sides of the stir stick, but outside the lines. Outside the lines, opposite sides of the stir stick. Those are called alternate exterior. Alternate meaning opposite sides of the stir stick. 4 and 5 are opposite. 1 and 8 are opposite. That's why we use the term alternate. 4 and 5 are interior. 1 and 8 are exterior. They're outside of the two lines. Now we're going to trace one set of angles which are on the same side of the stir stick, but with one angle in and one angle out of the lines. I'm going to squiggle these. One in, write the word in, one out, same side. One in, one out, same side of the stir stick. One in, one out, same side of the stir stick. These are called corresponding angles. Corresponding angles. One in, one out, same side. Ready? Now we're going to trace one set of angles which are also on the same side of the stir stick, but both between the lines. Both between the lines. I'm going to use, you can use purple or a highlighter here. I'm using purple. So both between the lines and same side. See that? Between the lines on the same side. That'd be 4 and 6. Would be a pair of those. These have a name. I'm going to give you 2 of them because I'll use them interchangeably. But you could, if you were to look this up, you need to know both names. That's called consecutive, which means next to. Consecutive interior. Also known as same side interior. Same side interior. It is super critical you understand these 4 terms. So I suggest you pause the video and just literally take 10 seconds. And with your fingers, say those out loud. Put your fingers where those angles belong. Opposite of the stir stick, same side. And re-describe what these 4 angles are to yourself. Pause. Welcome back. Okay, now on that note, you're going to do this with me. I'd like you to take your stir stick here, and you're going to lay your stir stick down right there. That's going to be your transversal. And you're going to determine these pairs of angles. You're going to determine whether it's alternate interior, opposite sides of the transversal between 2 lines, alternate exterior, opposite of the transversal outside of 2 lines, corresponding, 1 in, 1 out, same side, consecutive interior, same side of the transversal between the lines, or, watch out, or previous lesson, vertical angles, which are congruent, or, there's one more, share a spine, make a line, linear pairs. Okay, so take a look. That's where your stir stick is. That means we're cutting across these 2 lines. Just darken them. We're cutting across these 2 lines. That's your stir stick. Very lightly shade what between the 2 lines, because that's going to help you realize that's your interior. Your interior is always between the 2 lines that we're working with. All right, let's take a look. We're going to do 12 and 13. 12 and 13, sweep. Okay, 12 and 13, same side of the stir stick between the lines. That's going to be consecutive interior. Try 10 and 15. Sweep. 10 and 15, 1 in, 1 out, same side. If you go back up, look at your description, 1 in, 1 out, same side, that's corresponding. How about 12 and 10? Trace the straight lines. Watch out, 12 and 10, they are vertical. Bow tie angles. X-wing fighter angles, cat whiskers, 12 and 10 are vertical angles. Let's do 9 and 16. 9 and 16 are both outside of the lines, but they're on opposite sides, so we would call that alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior. It is super important you can identify these angles yourself. So we're going to move your stir stick now. You're going to move your stir stick and then identify these sets of angles yourself. Pause. Welcome back. Okay, so your stir stick moved this way. That means what defines between, we're cutting across these two lines now. That means your interior changed. This is now considered your interior. When you change your stir stick, you change what's the interior. So 12 and 3. 12 and 3. Those would be alternate interior angles. 1 and 11. Outside the lines, opposite sides. That would be alternate exterior angles. 9 and 3, same side between the lines. That's consecutive. Consecutive means next to. Interior angles. 3 and 10, one's in, one's out, same side. That is corresponding. Okay, it's very important you understand these positional relationships are true even when you don't have parallel lines. These two black lines here, okay, these two lines, they were not parallel. But all of these relationships still hold. So you need to understand these words describe the relative position of angles, whether or not they're parallel. Very important. But really interesting things happen when they are parallel. With these angles, really interesting things happen when they are parallel. So when lines become parallel, so why don't you just physically trace this line here. Trace this line, kind of get a feel for it. Those are parallel. Put your little arrow feathers on there. In some books, the arrow feathers go the same way. Other books, the arrow feathers alternate. It's the same thing. This little notation here means parallel. If I ask you to draw parallel lines and you don't add those arrow feathers, you have not drawn parallel lines. Okay, so you have two lines. You have your transversal. Here goes your stir stick right there. Now, when lines become parallel, really interesting things happen to these relational angles. One, I'm going to use blue, same blue, green, red, a highlighter, purple. Then we'll talk about that always one right here. Blue. When you have parallel lines, alternate interior angles are always going to be congruent. So the next four angles are congruent. So alternate interior, that would be, for example, like 3 and 6. Now we add hatch marks. It could also be 4 and 5. Both of those are parallel. I'm only going to mark one here because it gets too many markings if I did all of them twice. So alternate interior angles are automatically congruent. When lines are parallel. So when lines are parallel, that's the symbol for parallel, 2 double backslash. When lines are parallel, alternate exteriors are also congruent. So in this case, alternate exteriors, opposite sides of the stir stick outside of the lines. Those would be congruent as well. This is only true when lines are parallel. When lines are parallel, this is all premised the start that you have parallel lines. Corresponding angles are congruent. The one in, one out, same side, that's also congruent when lines are parallel. So that would be like 4 and 8, 3 and 7, 1 and 5, 2 and 6. Those are all corresponding. Now these three are congruent only if lines are parallel. But vertical angles are always congruent, even when lines aren't parallel. Let's trace one pair of vertical angles so that you remember what any two straight lines, use your highlighter there, any two straight lines, those angles directly across from each other are always going to be equal. So those are always going to be equal. Those bow tie angles are always equal, even if you don't have parallel lines. Okay, so all four of those angles are equal. Two sets of angles are supplementary, which means they add up to 180. One of them is dependent on parallel lines. So if you have parallel lines, consecutive interior angles are supplementary, which means they add up to 180. What are consecutive interior? That's the same side interior. That would be like 4 and 6. Those are not equal, but they would add up to 180. Three and 5 are also same side interior angles. Those also add up to 180 when lines are parallel. Last one, linear pairs, share a spine, make a line. Back-to-back angles, share a spine, make a line. Why don't you trace and draw and say that 3 times? Share a spine, make a line. Share a spine, make a line. Share a spine, make a line. You're tracing, be tracing. Those always add up to 180, even when lines are not parallel. So any share a spine, make a line angles. Why don't you just trace a pair? 1 and 2 would be examples. Share a spine, make a line. Those, of course, add up to 180. Okay. Super important, you know what's equal and under what circumstance and what is supplementary. Let me give you a few things to help you remember these. My notations aren't coming out very well. I wonder why. Okay, so by far the most important angles you need to watch out for are what I call armpits. Yep, think sweaty armpits. Armpits of the Z. I remember correctly, there was a Z here. There's a Z here. Sideways or something like that. Okay, what this means is when you see a Z and lines are parallel, okay, automatically those angles are congruent if those are parallel. Armpits of the Z. They're really easy to spot if you just think of the Z and then think of those sweaty armpits. Those sweaty, hairy armpits. I just grossed a lot of you out, but You'll remember, sweaty, hairy armpits are going to be congruent when lines are parallel. Let's spot a few of them. Okay, so when lines are parallel, armpits of the Z are congruent. Ready? Let's spot some parallel lines first. You see this parallel line? Just trace it. Ready? Trace here. There's a Z there. Armpit of the Z. See that Z? That means this angle right here, this angle right here have to be exactly the same. Let's do another one. We have parallel lines here. Little arrow feathers. Got to put the arrow feathers there. Ready? We have an armpit of the Z. See that Z there? Z doesn't mean it has to be directly horizontal, so these angles are going to be equal. These are alternate interior angles, also known as armpits of the Z in my class. If you say armpits of the Z instead of alternate interior angles, which is a technical term, I will take it on a test. Ready? Let's do one more, just so you can see them. Parallel lines. Armpits of the Z. See that? Right there? That means these angles right here, right there. So there's lots of examples you should watch out for. There's parallel lines, and you can do armpits of the Z this way. Armpits of the Z. All of these are congruent when you have parallel lines. By far the most common. Watch out for those. Those sweaty, hairy armpits of the Z. Okay, ready? So you need to be able to do this. You need to be able to talk about the position of the angles and the relationship when lines are parallel. Notice all of these are parallel. These little arrow feathers here. Ready? Let's sweep A and B. Their position, they are alternate exterior angles. Opposite sides of the stir stick outside of the lines. Their relationship, when lines are parallel, they are congruent. Ready? Let's sweep A and B here. A and B. One's in, one's out, same side. Corresponding angles. When lines are parallel, corresponding angles, the relationship between them is that they are congruent. Two lines, we're going to put your stir stick right there. A and B, they are consecutive interior angles between the lines right next to each other. Consecutive interior, also known as same side interior. These are not congruent when lines are parallel, but they do add up to 180. So we would say supplementary. So in the next 6, I would like you to sweep them, describe their positional relationship and their position and then their relationship. And all of these are either going to be congruent or sup. Do this page yourself. Pause. Welcome back. Let's see how you did. Okay, these ones, opposite sides of the stir stick, but still between the lines. This is alternate interior. And they are going to be congruent when lines are parallel. A and B. These guys share a spine and make a line. They are a linear pair. and they are supplementary. Adds up to 180. This one, there's your stir stick cutting across. That's A and B. These are armpits of the Z. Same thing here, armpits of the Z. That's alternate interior angles. And those are always congruent when lines are parallel. This one, they're on opposite sides of the stir stick, outside of the lines. This is alternate exterior angles. They're always congruent. This one, there's your stir stick. You have one in, one out, same side. That's corresponding. And when lines are parallel, these corresponding angles are congruent. Last one, hopefully you caught it, that you have two straight lines and you have bow tie angles. Bow tie angles, which means those are vertical and therefore they are congruent. Okay, now we're going to pull it all together. Says right here, we're going to find all possible angles given this scenario. Let's look at what we got here. I'm going to talk you through this one, and the next one you're doing on your own. First off, we have three sets of parallel lines, 1, 2, and 3. Technically, we have two different stir sticks. Okay, so I'm going to make this one red. Let's just do one stir stick at a time. Lay your stir stick right there. And our goal is to find all possible angles. You ready? Start with always what you have. We have the 105. That's between the lines. So we want to watch out for armpits of the Z here. Armpits of the Z. That means this is also 105. We have bow tie angles here, vertical angles, which means this right here is 105. Corresponding, one's in, one's out, same side. Be very careful here. There's another set of armpits of the Z. I'm going to switch colors so you can see it. Armpits of the Z. That means this whole thing is 105. Corresponding, same side, right there, that's 105. Let's see what else we can do here. Always ask yourself what you can do. Don't overlook the obvious. We have another vertical angle right there. That's 105. Can you physically sweep that for me? See that rainbow there? Can you physically sweep it for me, please? Isn't that up to 180? We take 105 away from 180. We can get 75. Now we can do armpits of the Z this way. Armpits of the Z. So we're going to bring that 75 up here as well. Also a linear pair. And if you watch carefully, you're actually you can just walk them straight up. All of those are 75. Whoops, forgot one. Vertical angles, right there. So the minute I tell you something's parallel, you get a ton of information. Ready? Let's move our stir stick to the other one. We have technically two transversals here. Two of them. Okay, now we're going to walk what we can find here on this transversal. Be very careful here. That 105 is not related, nor is it cut in half. I know some of you are thinking that this goes like this. Nope, it doesn't. Erase that. You do not know that's cutting in half. Let's look at what we know for sure. We know for sure that this is 59. So that means this right here has to be 59 degrees because they're vertical angles. See this green here? The whole thing's 105, and we have 59. Do the math. No, you may not use a calculator. This right here is 46, which means that's 46. Let's see what else we can do. Can you trace with me armpits of the Z? See that? Armpits of the Z. Let me get real close here. That means we can take that 59 and we can pull it into right here. Oh, looky there. That's alternate interior angles. These are corresponding. Vertical. Corresponding and vertical again. So looky, you can walk that 59 all the way down. And we can do this. That's 180. 180 minus 59 gets us 21. 121. That means this angle right here, 121 degrees. Armpits of the Z. Look at that information. You get a ton of information when I tell you you have parallel lines with transversals. Ready? Here I give you a list. You're going to do this one on your own. Your goal is to find everything possible. You want to watch out for these angles which are congruent. Alternate interior, alternate X, corresponding and vertical are always congruent. And angles which are supplementary. Consecutive interior angles when lines are parallel and linear pairs. Do as much as you can on your own, then restart the video. Pause. Welcome back. I'm just going to show you the answers here. I'm not going to explain anything. Just watch. How many did you get? Circle your empty spots and try to figure out which ones you missed yourself. If you did manage to get everything, you deserve major kudos. That is not easy to spot all that. If you got most of them, that's excellent. If you missed a lot of those, you might want to come in for a little extra tutoring. I'll happily review this with you.